myself. Oh no, give me that cell. Oh, I gotta go like Cobain. 8 years to the grave, gone insane. My blood got propane. How you gon' go and fill my name with shame? Already cross-faded, making it to the disco. I hate it, and you know how this goes. You framed it, picture painted in my room. This that real life shit, none on Zoom. Got the scene in it.
Make sure you subscribe to JerCrispy.
What's up, y'all? It's your host with the most decimals. JerCrispy. Welcome back to another video. Today, what I got y'all is why LittleBigPlanet died. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, follow social media. Gonna pop up on the screen. Mind you, me and my twin brother used to play this game on the PS3. It was an amazing, fun game. And to me, I feel like the game done died. It just they didn't get that much effort to it. But good.
In 2008,
Follow social media gonna pop up on the screen. On the road to 300, and let's get. Look at that.
Media Molecule introduced the world to LittleBigPlanet, a charming and innovative platformer that promised to revolutionize user-generated content in gaming. With its adorable Sackboy mascot and the mantra play, create, share, LittleBigPlanet captured the hearts and imaginations of millions, spawning sequels, spin-offs, and even a kart racing game. It seemed that Media Molecule had struck gold, creating a franchise that could stand the test of time and continue to evolve with each new installment. Yet in 2025, the once vibrant world of LittleBigPlanet has fallen eerily silent. The servers for the original games have shut down, and the series' presence in the gaming landscape has diminished to a mere whisper of its former glory. So what happened to this beloved franchise? How did a series that once stood as a shining example of creativity and community-driven content find itself fading into obscurity? Why did LittleBigPlanet die? As always, our story starts with two people, Alex Evans and Mark Healy. Alex was a programmer and Mark was an artist, and the duo worked together at a company called Bullfrog Productions, which was ran by Peter Molyneux. After producing classics like Dungeon Keeper, the studio was sold over to Electronic Arts, and Molyneux started a new studio with the key staff from Bullfrog called Lionhead Studios. Naturally, this included Alex and Mark, and from there, Lionhead went on to produce highly regarded titles such as Black and White and Fable. In his spare time, Mark Healy worked on a
Fable, that was the game. I remember that.
low-budget side project called Ragdoll Kung Fu. It was a weird little game that had a $50 budget. The gameplay consisted of using your mouse to control ragdoll fighters to beat people up while collecting power-ups. The game ended up being the very first third-party title on Steam and did pretty well for itself given the ragtag development cycle. The project gave Mark and Alex a taste of what it was like to make games with full creative control and made a bit of a name for themselves outside of working under Peter Molyneux. But leaving a financially secure job was a pretty risky leap, so they decided to wait before pursuing anything serious. Back at Lionhead, the studio's next couple titles bombed financially. Paired with its explosive growth, it was clear that the company wasn't going to last much longer if something didn't change. So Peter Molyneux decided to lay off 90 employees to sweeten the deal for a potential Microsoft acquisition. And suddenly, this changed everything. It no longer seemed like staying at Lionhead would be a safe employment option, so Alex and Mark, along with Kareem Attorney and David Smith, left Lionhead to chase their own crazy dreams and form Media Molecule. And
they're coming straight in. Trust me, I've got nothing.
And their first project was a new, ambitious title called LittleBigPlanet. The earliest prototypes of LittleBigPlanet certainly looked interesting to say the least.
Right.
The first pitch was a tech demo with a character called Yellowhead. It revolved around physics-based 2D gameplay, and even at its earliest stage, there were quite a few similarities to the gameplay of LittleBigPlanet that we're all familiar with, which was impressive for something cobbled together so quickly. From this demo alone, Sony were surprisingly interested, and they decided to give Media Molecule a shot, but not with blind faith. If Media Molecule wanted Sony's full backing, they would need to have something substantial to show in just 6 months. With that, the team got to work. LittleBigPlanet was going to be something different, something fun, quirky, creative, and overflowing with character and charm. It was going to be a platformer, but with an insane level of customization, a unique art style, and a heavy emphasis on replayable, user-generated content. It was unlike any other game on the market, and it was gonna be amazing. The robust costume creator was inspired by the one in Ragdoll Kung Fu, leading to the creation of the iconic Sackboy that the series has become known for. After just 6 months of work, Sony was happy with what they'd seen and decided to move forward with their partnership, featuring LittleBigPlanet at the 2007 Game Development Conference.
Yeah.
This is where the world first became aware of LittleBigPlanet, and, well, people loved it. It was a dream come true for the developers. The game clearly had a market. But there was little time to celebrate with how much work they had left, since Sony wanted this game finished as soon as possible. LittleBigPlanet needed a story mode to showcase what was possible in the level editor, but there were a bunch of problems to tackle first. Unlike most games, which have their own developer-exclusive tools to create levels, it was crucial that the story mode was made with the same tools available to the players. This would allow the tools to be thoroughly play-tested by the developers and showcase what their game was really capable of through the gameplay of the campaign. After about a year of development, LittleBigPlanet was ready to launch to the public. Complete with an in-depth level editor, a way to access a wide variety of user-made content, a solid campaign, and some starter levels made by a public beta in which players got early access, it seemed like the perfect game that nobody even knew they wanted. So, how was the game received? On the 27th of October, 2008, LittleBigPlanet was officially released. And I probably don't need to tell you, it was monstrously successful. The game sold millions of copies, was a critical darling, and won countless awards. Everyone who played it fell completely in love with it and its premise of play, create, and share. At its core, the gameplay was a 2.5D physics-based platformer where you could move between 3 layers at will and grab certain objects to either pull or swing off of. You'd start by playing through the game's charming story mode where you would collect all sorts of prize bubbles. This would unlock costumes, stickers, materials, and objects for you to use to make creations of your own. Then, you would publish whatever level you made for others to enjoy. Or you could just play what others have made instead. Either way,
and that was fun too to do it.
LittleBigPlanet allowed players to express themselves in unprecedented ways. The game oozed with so much creativity.
Ain't they the main characters too already on it? Like they already had Mario, Luigi, Sonic on that mug. They had like Rayman, dude. Like you could dress up like Rayman. Goldbox. You had like all characters. Like, they had like book characters. They had.
That it was inevitable that it encouraged players to do the same. Even if you didn't want to make entire levels, it was easy to spend hours just putting together outfits with costumes and stickers. The costumes were pretty self-explanatory. You could dress up Sackboy with a bunch of different clothes and materials. But the stickers were super unique and revolutionized character and level creation. At any time, you could open your Poppet and place stickers anywhere on the screen, even on Sackboy. There were hundreds of stickers, some were 2D, while others were called decorations, which were 3D models. Since you could combine these with costumes, it led to one of the most advanced character creators of any game at the time. The mechanic was also great for decorating the levels you created, letting you transform a boring cardboard wasteland into something fun and colorful. Of course, the actual level creation tools were stellar as well. You could select from dozens of materials to create whatever you wanted. Some materials were grabbable, could be blown up, and were extra heavy, and some like dark matter were indestructible and couldn't be moved. You could place them in any shape, put stickers on them, make them hazardous, or strap rockets and bombs onto them. Plus, you could choose from a bunch of music, change the background of stages, and control the lighting of a level. The possibilities were...
Hey!
What a rush! I'm on.
Really endless. Not only did the game have all of these features, but Media Molecule also worked with Sony to create a website for the game. It allowed players to log in with their PlayStation account to easily browse for levels on their computer and queue them up to be played in the game later.
That's with the Michael Jackson stuff. Oh, cool.
Me, and it helped the community flourish. And less than a year after launch, players uploaded over 1 million levels and amassed over 240 million plays through this site.
Damn.
It's extremely important to the community, so keep that in mind as we come around to it a bit later.
Damn.
Now, as you've probably noticed, I'm on camera, something that I don't typically do.
Right.
My goal on this channel is to make this content into the best video game retrospectives out there, so if you enjoy the new style or have any feedback, please let me know in the comments. Also, I just launched a new Discord server for the community, and we plan on doing community game nights, gaming tournaments, movie nights, and so much more. So if you're interested, consider joining using the link in the description. Anyways, like I said, the game had 240 million plays on its user-generated levels in less than a year. Players loved LittleBigPlanet, so it shouldn't come as a surprise that the game received multiple 10 out of 10 review scores and Game of the Year awards, including more than 80 industry awards, which is wild to say the least. And it sold well, with over 1.3 million copies sold by January of 2009. Basically overnight,
Right.
Media Molecule had gone from a small, scrappy indie developer to one of the most innovative and prestigious names in the gaming industry. And they weren't about to stop anytime soon, because LittleBigPlanet wasn't done after launch. There were tons of DLCs to follow, and updates to fix bugs and add other features. This ranged from costume packs to sticker packs, music packs, and even mini campaigns that contained all of the above with unique items and mechanics. Examples include the Metal Gear Solid pack and the Pirates of the Caribbean pack, both of which were adored by fans. Then,
Facts.
helping to cement the game's success even further, a Game of the Year edition was released on September 8th, 2009,
As it deserved.
which came with a bunch of DLC and a selection of curated community levels, complete with creator interviews. Now, I will say, much of the DLC's development was outsourced to other studios, including Tarsier Studios, Supermassive Games, and Fireproof Games. It may seem like a weird way to manage the content for your wildly successful game, but the team at Media Molecule needed the manpower for something even bigger and better: LittleBigPlanet 2. Turns out, a sequel was pretty much in the works as soon as the first game was out the door. But there was a big obstacle that would need to be addressed by Media Molecule before a new sequel could even be teased to the public. The game needed full backwards compatibility with everything made in the first game, because
Hey.
otherwise the sequel would fragment the community. So, when the sequel was formally announced on May 10th, 2010, this was, of course, among the list of many new features. The announcement led to a webpage chock full of teasers, screenshots, and of course a trailer. This time around, there was an even bigger emphasis on user-generated content. LittleBigPlanet 2 wasn't just a platform game anymore, it was going to be a platform for a game. The new features included microchips to program objects, AI characters you could dress up and program with unique behaviors, ways to make vehicles, new game modes, and a bunch of power-ups. Whereas before, in the original game, you were mostly restricted to creating platformers, it was now possible to create a wide variety of different genres. Top-down perspectives, RPGs, arcade shoot-em-ups, fighting games, first-person shooters, and actual feature-length movies were all possible. If you could think of it, it could become a level. LittleBigPlanet 2 was the shining example of how to do a sequel right, and it instantly made the first game seem like it was unfinished by comparison. LittleBigPlanet 2 launched on January 18th, 2011, and it was met with universal acclaim from critics and players alike. The game received widespread praise for these expanded creation tools, improved gameplay mechanics, and charming presentation. And just like its predecessor, LittleBigPlanet 2's critical reception was overwhelmingly positive, with a 91 on Metacritic. The story mode was also well received, with many praising its quirky characters and engaging narrative that served as an excellent showcase for the game's expanded creation tools. In terms of commercial performance, LittleBigPlanet 2 achieved significant success. The game debuted at #1 on the UK All Formats chart in its first week of release,
Yes, sir.
demonstrating strong initial sales. In North America, it was the 4th best-selling game in January of 2011, selling over 353,000 units in its first couple of weeks on the market. It seemed like Media Molecule had built a franchise that could last to eternity, but behind the scenes, the sentiment was looking a bit different. See, Media Molecule achieved massive success with LittleBigPlanet and LittleBigPlanet 2. But they weren't looking to sit around and milk the franchise to death like many large game developers do. They wanted to move on to other projects. So after a successful partnership with Sumo Digital on a DLC called the Cross Controller Pack, Media Molecule decided to take a step back and let Sumo take charge on the next installment of the LittleBigPlanet franchise. While this seems like a strange decision, there was no studio better equipped to handle the development of the next game than Sumo Digital, as the company was full of active LittleBigPlanet community members who knew what the next game needed to be. So, work began on LittleBigPlanet 3, led by this new team, with Media Molecule on the sidelines, the same year that LittleBigPlanet 2 launched in 2011. Of all the development cycles in the franchise, LittleBigPlanet 3 had the messiest. A huge amount of content had to be cut from the game, including entire areas, themes, and characters which either didn't fit or needed extensive reworking. And that wasn't even the worst of it, because there was another issue that made this game's development process messy from the very start. Originally, LittleBigPlanet 3 was just going to be for the PlayStation 3, but Sony was working on the PlayStation 4, and they wanted one of their flagship franchises to have a sequel on their new console ASAP. So not only was Sumo Digital working on a franchise that they had no experience with, they now had to create and support two versions of the same game with a strict deadline. Even worse, one of these versions was for a console that nobody had experience developing for. It was a terrible position to be in, but they had to make the best of things. So, LittleBigPlanet 3 released on November 18th, 2014 for both the PS3 and PS4. It brought along with it many new tools to work with. Everything from the past two games could be ported over if you've played them, DLC included. There were 3 new characters apart from Sackboy who had unique costumes and abilities, with Sackboy receiving new abilities in turn as well. The layer limit was expanded to 16, allowing players to make huge new levels with an insane amount of depth and a bunch of other improvements. Not only was the game brimming with creative innovations, it enabled the community to make their own, and LittleBigPlanet 3 should have been the best game yet. The issue, however, was that it didn't work. Among any number of features just not working as intended, there were numerous crashes and entire save files getting corrupted. This forced people to restart the entire story mode and, much worse, lose every level, costume, and object they ever created.
Damn.
For a game of this nature, that's about the worst thing imaginable. The issue was so widespread that people began speedrunning how quickly they could corrupt their profiles, and this was just the tip of the iceberg. The story mode was incredibly short and barely featured any of the 3 new characters, and online, the heart and soul of the series for many frequently disconnected. Additionally, there was no crossplay between PS3 and PS4 players. This split the community, which was already smaller than ever due to the extremely buggy launch that drove many away. They either hopped back onto LittleBigPlanet 3 or moved on to something else entirely. Many of the worst bugs did get fixed over time, but it took longer than it should have, and the damage was already done. Compared to before, the community was basically dead. The game did receive DLC after launch, but it was some of the most underwhelming in the series. With slow development, underwhelming DLCs, and a general fizzling out of the passion surrounding LittleBigPlanet, LittleBigPlanet 3 was by far the most hated game in the series. And with online multiplayer never quite being fixed, the community continued to be non-existent throughout the life of this game. Updates stopped on May 18th, 2017, and LittleBigPlanet 3's support officially ended. But looking at the numbers, the sales of LittleBigPlanet 3 were still pretty impressive. Today, estimates claim that the first title has sold over 4.5 million copies, the second title 3.4 million copies, and the third title 5.5 million copies. While sales figures were obviously quite solid, the general sentiment and excitement surrounding the series had been on the decline for a while, and without Media Molecule's involvement, it was unclear what would happen to LittleBigPlanet. I mean, how much more could they really do to innovate a game franchise that has already done so much? Was there even a way to innovate and build upon the create and share ethos that LBP had been focused on from the beginning? Well, not really. So, after 6 years of silence, a spin-off was born. On June 11th, 2020, fans received word of a new entry into the LittleBigPlanet franchise called Sackboy: A Big Adventure. It was a 3D platformer spin-off developed by Sumo Digital and set to release on the PlayStation 5. It came out on November 12th, 2020, and was a pretty decent game. It managed to sell about 1.3 million copies in all. But unlike other entries in the series, there was no way to create any kind of user-generated content. It was a big shift from the formula in the previous games, and it caused a lot of longtime fans to ignore this new title and go back to the classics. Even if it was smaller than ever in 2020, there were still thousands of players on each mainline title and millions of levels to choose from. But just 12 days after Sackboy: A Big Adventure came out, those longtime fans encountered an issue. LBP.
Did you know you don't need a computer science degree to work for companies like Tesla, IBM, Apple, and other tech companies? I know, because we've helped thousands of students without degrees land high-paying IT and cybersecurity and cloud jobs. And now I want to show you how we did it, and how you can get an IT job in just 4 months instead of 4 years.
LBP.me, that website that I mentioned earlier, had gone offline due to attacks from hackers. This wasn't a catastrophic event on its own, as you could still play the levels just fine, and the website was quickly restored too. But it meant someone was actively working to damage the game's servers, and they had just landed the first blow. Unknown to everyone at the time, this marked the beginning of the end for the series. To understand why, we need to remember that backwards compatibility was critical to Media Molecule when they made LittleBigPlanet 2. It was necessary that, above all else, a sequel would not split the most important aspect of the series, its community. This meant that every level from the first game had to be playable in the second game. This same principle was applied to the third game as well. But achieving backwards compatibility for literally millions of levels is no small feat, especially when they need to actively keep track of player stats and level updates on top of all of that. So the solution that Media Molecule settled on was hosting all of the levels in the series on the same server in order to distribute this information across all 3 games simultaneously. It was an extremely effective solution to the problem, but opened up a much worse one in the long run. If there was a security vulnerability in one of the games, it was a vulnerability in all of the games. And the original LittleBigPlanet server was developed in 2008, which is practically ancient in terms of online security. So in other words, there was a gaping hole in the server security ready to be exploited at any time. It wasn't a matter of if, but a matter of when disaster would strike. On March 6, 2021, that day finally came. Anyone who attempted to play a level was met with the pop-up, "A problem occurred when attempting to connect to the LittleBigPlanet servers." Unknown to players at the time, the servers were experiencing a denial-of-service attack from a hacker who gained access. This effectively rendered most online features inaccessible across all games and caused a bunch of other problems. And as a result, on March 10th, Sumo Digital took the servers offline. 2 days later, the developers announced that the servers were taken down for technical issues and that they will return eventually. It wasn't until May that they came back online. But something wasn't right. Some people were experiencing bizarre crashes, and others were encountering strange or sometimes even hateful messages when viewing player profiles. So after a month, the servers were taken back offline.
Bro, them hackers gotta stop that shit, bro. Like, y'all gotta stop, bro. Yeah. And that's like kids, bro. That's like little kids, teenagers playing that game. It's probably like grown-ass men. They still live with their mama at the age of 36. Worrying about little kids and how they trying to enjoy their time because they had a bad childhood and shit like that. Man, fuck them hackers, bro. This could have been.
Next few months, the developers periodically.
This could have been way more output, and they could have had like a 5, 6, 7. Man, this stuff could have been going to this day. Still going right now. I could have been doing gameplays to number 1 all the way to. They could have made it all the way to 10. And put it out there, bro.
They posted to social media, ensuring that they were looking into things. Then, finally, on September 13th, they had something to announce. Service was back for LittleBigPlanet 3 on the PS4, albeit with some missing features. Every other game, including the PS3 version of LBP3, would never come back online. And for a time, things seemed fine. Although on June 9th, 2022, LBP.me was taken offline for a second time due to repeated attacks, and this time it never returned. On January 7th, 2024, over 30 different accounts were banned. All of them were notable community figures. Some were content creators, private server developers, and it even included Media Molecule's account and the game's active community manager, Steven Isbell. The next day, the game servers were taken back offline so that the developers could investigate what happened. By March, the servers were still offline. Then, out of nowhere, it was announced that the online servers for LBP3 were officially shutting down. There was no longer an official way to access community levels or play online with friends in the entire franchise. The final nail in the coffin came with the delisting of LittleBigPlanet 3 and its DLC from the PlayStation Store on the 31st of October. The game currently has no future prospects nor active staff working on the franchise. The community manager, Steven Isbell's last day ended November 29th, 2024. This meant the only game left standing in the franchise was Sackboy: A Big Adventure. A solid game, sure, but it could never replace the mainline games. And unfortunately, Sony hasn't expressed any interest in reviving the LittleBigPlanet series, instead choosing to leave yet another iconic mascot behind in favor of their others. Until Sony decides to do something new with the IP, LittleBigPlanet will forever be stuck in this limbo. And just like that, LittleBigPlanet had a sudden, unexpected death. While
I'm gonna tell my twin brother. When we both get rich. We gotta revive LittleBigPlanet. I promise you we're gonna revive it, bro.
Prospects of the series are currently quite bleak. LittleBigPlanet has definitely made a positive impact on the industry as a whole. Not only have other sandbox games since followed in its footsteps, but
y'all probably gonna be like, or you can make things come back to life, JerCrispy, and blah blah blah. Yeah, you can. Yes, you can. Like how Multiverse is about to be dying off. I'm about to go ahead and shit. If I don't buy it, somebody gonna buy it. I'm gonna buy it and put all the characters that niggas want. I'm gonna have a website, fan select what kind of character they want. You could customize the stage and stuff like that. And you know, I'm gonna have it, and then I'm gonna tell my brother, me and him gonna work on Big Planet, the little Big Planet dude. We're gonna bring 5, 6, 7, 8. We're gonna bring back everything back. We're gonna try to bring everything back for y'all, man. For all the old heads.
Tons of developers got their start by making community levels. It also helped many other studios gain valuable experience, such as Tarsier Studios, who got their start working on assets and DLC for LBP before going on to make Little Nightmares 1 and 2. Sumo Digital has gone on to make all sorts of different titles, such as Snake Pass, Team Sonic Racing, and more.
Yeah, that's a good man.
To make Tearaway and then made Dreams, which is their latest title to date. It's less of a game, more of a game engine, and as a result, struggled to find much of an audience as LittleBigPlanet ever did, even if it's a fantastic game in its own right. Multiple founders have left the company since then, and the future of it is quite uncertain, with no new titles announced. And while LittleBigPlanet as a franchise seems hopeless, fans at Trixel Creative have been working on a spiritual revival of the series with Restitched for PC. The game's been in development for years at this point, and it honestly seems quite promising. Hopefully it can fill the void left behind by its predecessor. LittleBigPlanet was truly special, and its sudden demise is a true gaming tragedy. Did you ever play any of these games? Which ones did you enjoy?
Anywho, bro, I hope y'all enjoyed this video. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, follow on social media, pop on screen. I'm gonna see y'all when I see y'all. Y'all said it out of my heart, and I'm out.